Check out a couple of interviews. Larry Johnson reveals how Hollywood created Diddy and Jay-Z.
To Extra Fearless with Jason Whitlock. I'm Jason Whitlock, your host. I'm looking forward to this discussion. Jay-Z, the rapper, the mogul, in a lot of hot water, in a lot of controversy. He's caught up in the Club Diddy scandal, accused of participating in the rape of a 13-year-old, I believe in 2000 or many years ago, but there's a civil lawsuit going on, and Jay-Z issued a statement rebuking these allegations and talked about his honor and he's different and how the lawyer, Tony Busby, who's representing the alleged victim, doesn't understand who Jay-Z is and just how honorable Jay-Z is and how he spent his whole life protecting children while he was drug dealing and making satanic music. It was all about protecting children, and there's no way Jay-Z would be involved in this. And so who better to discuss this with on this show than Larry Johnson, the former NFL star running back, Penn State star, Kansas City Chief, Pro Bowler, All-Pro running back. Now, just one of the most fascinating people on social media. For those of us that like to dabble in conspiracy theories, Larry is fascinating. I hate to even call it conspiracy theories, but Larry's just fascinating because Larry will talk about whatever is interesting and whatever the conversations you're not supposed to have. Those are the conversations that Larry promotes. And Larry used to wear Rockaware, used to be associated with Jay-Z and Rock Nation. Larry Johnson, welcome back to the show. Larry, I'll just start with a very, very simple question. Should we take seriously these allegations against Jay-Z?
I think we should take serious any allegation that's involving the abuse of children and teenagers. And since we kind of know what this industry is, we need to look a little bit deeper. Now, they roll this carpet out in front of us because they want us to know. But of course, they're all going to do their due diligence with the PR and say, well, I'm honorable, I'm this, I'm that. But you've seen the symbolism. You've seen him wear do what thou wilt across his sweatshirt. We know that comes from Aleister Crowley. We know Aleister Crowley wrote a book called Sex Magic, which he promotes drugging and abusing children for the sake of some type of occult magic or energy that they formulate or they desire to make themselves younger. And then to carry that.
Hold for 1 second. Hold for 1 second, Larry. Aleister Crowley wrote a book that promoted the drugging of, what's the name of the book again?
It's called Sex Magic, and it's magic with a K on the end of it, because he wanted to differentiate from real magic to his type of magic.
All right, continue. I'm sorry. I did not know that.
Yeah, so the music industry adopts this doctrine, well, the do what thou wilt, the law of Thelema. So you would have to think that bringing a 13-year-old child into an after party of the MTV Awards, which is even strange enough because where is this young lady's parents? But we know that parents love to try to make their kids stars if they have the opportunity. So they'll let them go with certain celebrities. And so this has been pretty much the norm within these societies, is to abuse and get after the children and to use and combine drug use with that. And we've seen it with Bill Cosby. We've seen it with other celebrities who are close-knit into that, in that small circle.
Well, I think one person we've seen who's directly connected to Jay-Z is R. Kelly. They had an album, The Best of Both Worlds. To me, they were both established intentionally. R. Kelly at the top of the R&B industry and Jay-Z at the top of the hip-hop industry. You know, I don't think you get those positions by accident. I don't think it's based on talent alone.
I never think it's based on just talent. And of course, you know, he makes a lot of good music that made us tap our feet. And when 3 a.m. hits with the woman that we loved, it was the seal the deal type of music. But with that, of course, being that close together, being behind the scenes and seeing how these people really feed off of each other, they're not separate. He came out with a quote said that you can't judge us like you judging every rapper. But sir, you're close and you have albums with these people. You have after parties with these people. You have celebrity functions where you go on trips and vacations with these people. So to say that you know nothing, even if you weren't a part of it, you have to know a little bit of something. But since they take a vow of secrecy, we're not going to be able to even scratch the surface of even if they put them on the witness stand because they all taken an oath.
Well, there are rumors that like Diddy is inside his prison cell, and every time he gets out, he snitches on someone new trying to get out from underneath. Do you think someone like Diddy could, instead of Jeffrey Epstein being killed or committing suicide, do you think Diddy is perhaps a source of information and maybe is snitching on people?
I think Diddy is the poor man's Ghislaine Maxwell. I think he's not going to snitch on anyone. I think he may allude to it, maybe subliminal to it, but like I said before, these people take oaths, and this is being put in front of our faces just to mirror the Jeffrey Epstein, scandal and foolishness, and nothing came out of that. No one snitched. We know the flight logs. We know the people who have gone. None of those people have ever been brought into the courtroom to say, hey, I knew him or I didn't know him, and this went on, this didn't go on. It just kind of went away. So especially with, Negro America, they know we have a susceptibility to gossip and hip hop. So they use this as a distraction, knowing that nothing is going to come of it. It's just going to be running on and on and on. And then we get to the final show, and then they're going to say, oh, these people changed their stories, or there was always a loophole. I mean, look at the Jussie Smollett situation. We know he lied about this being jumped. We know he lied about the persons that he was with. They lied. So to have the court turn over and say, no, you're good, you're free. You spent enough time doing this lie. I mean, come on. You have to assume it was going to go down the same exact way with Sean Combs.
So you think eventually nothing's going to happen to even Diddy or Sean Combs?
I mean, he may sit down for a little bit, but we don't know what happened to R. Kelly. Have we seen photos of him in jail? Have we heard any stories of any inmate that has seen R. Kelly? Have you heard anything that came out of the jail cell he's in? And now that brothers got cell phones in jails, you trying to tell me nobody has said they seen R. Kelly? I don't know, but they're all in the same group. This is what they sacrifice or ritualize themselves for. This is what they do. This is a sense of worship for them. Why would they get punished for the way they worship or encouraged to worship? Like blackmailing is the number one thing to keep people in line. So why not continue to keep doing it? Why would I get punished to do it?
Larry, have you ever heard of the West Memphis 3?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so the West Memphis 3 was an occult-like killing of a young child, and HBO did 3 documentaries on it. And all 3 documentaries ended up accusing someone different of doing the crime. The West Memphis 3 went down for it. Damian Eccles, Jason Baldwin, and Jesse Miss Kelly. These are 3 teenage boys that murdered a really young child. And HBO created all of this reasonable doubt with these series of 3 different documentaries accusing someone else of doing it every time. And this is where I agree and slightly disagree with you. It's like, there is some type of an occult-like ritual, because I think the West Memphis 3 did it. Yeah. And I think they had to go through, the Damian Eccles in particular, had to sit in prison, and then he gets sprung years later, and he becomes this celebrity, and Johnny Depp and all these people are waiting on him when he gets out of prison. And I can remember I went down this rabbit hole, and they had me convinced they were innocent. And then by the time I got to the bottom of the rabbit hole, I was like, oh my God, these guys did it. And so that's what I almost think about Diddy and maybe even Jay-Z. It's like, you're gonna have to go through this imprisonment, humiliation, and then 10 years from now, 15, no different than the Central Park 5. You ever go down that rabbit hole? Those guys actually did it. They snitched on themselves. They did it with their parents sitting right there. They didn't rape the woman because they couldn't penetrate her, but they did do all the other stuff. But you do the time, 10, 15, 20 years, then they give you these $1 million settlements. Maybe that's what we're looking at as it relates to Diddy and Jay-Z.
And maybe, but Damian Eccles isn't part of the Hollywood elite. The Central Park guys aren't part of the Hollywood elite. These people are controlled. There's more money to be made through the gossip and entertainment than it would be with the West Memphis Three or the Central Park boys. Like this was going on, Sean Combs. It's a moneymaker. It's not only a moneymaker, but it's a good distraction if you want to drag this along into something else. Now we know what's coming up. We know the Super Bowl is coming up, where Jay-Z still has a hand in the halftime show performances, and we know that Kendrick Lamar is pretty much protest rap. So does this fall into this? See, we don't see the final ending. We only see, A and B right now. We don't know D, E, and F. We only see it from the beginning of it. So we really don't know what's going to happen. But we know that in the span of the next 4 or 5 months, it'll tell us what we need to know and how they're using Sean Combs to whatever money-making scheme they're making or distraction. We all know where it's going to come or go to based on how the NFL deals with Jay-Z and how the court system deals with Sean Combs.
Obviously, you'd be speculating, and do you think that these allegations against Jay-Z could interfere with his relationship with the NFL?
As somebody who has been in multiple hot seats with the NFL with the domestic violence and issues and stuff and how they treated me during that, I would think they would do something or say something or even have a statement. I would think so, because obviously, doing what you did or being accused of doing what you did to a 13-year-old child, a teenager, I mean, that's a little bit harsh. I mean, this is almost like domestic abuse. And this the first time the NFL has ever heard, I don't think it's ever heard, but when it comes to somebody getting raped or sexually assaulted like that, the NFL doesn't play with that. We know it has happened across the league, all over the place, but we don't know. But it'll tell you exactly what to make of this situation if the NFL either comes down hard or they treat this very softly or just say, we'll wait to the end to see what happens.
So I've heard this argument as it relates to Kanye West. There's a naivety to these black installed celebrities that I've heard people make the argument that Kanye actually thought, hey, I'm a billionaire now. I get to call my own shots. I'm a boss. I don't have to obey my masters. And that's when he kind of spun off the rails and they did these things to like, nah, bro, you still got these puppet strings on. I don't care what your bank account says. I wonder if that naivety is what's impacting Jay-Z, that maybe he got full of himself, thought he was at the same table as the actual leaders, and maybe they're putting Jay-Z back in his place.
It could be. I mean, obviously, the statements that he came out with, I mean, he really puts himself on the pedestal, talking about honor, that he's not that guy, that he really cares about the children. And obviously, we've seen the music, we hear the music, we know the symbolism. So you have to be really high up on the pedestal with this godlike mentality as if you cannot be touched. I mean, you will meet your fate like everybody else in this world will meet their fate, and you will meet it going down broke, just like we can't take money out of this world, so we all go to the grave broke. And to have this mentality of being godlike, yes, I think this is a humbling experience. I know it's a humiliation experience, and no matter what he says, the symbolism contradicts what he actually truly believes. But those who are not hip to the game are usually fooled by the players on the court.
So Jay-Z, is he different than what Russell Simmons used to represent in the hip hop world? and Russell Simmons has been run out of the country and out of influence in America. He's basically out in exile. Is Jay-Z on the same level, different level than Russell Simmons? Could the same fate perhaps await Jay-Z?
I think so, and I don't even think it has to do with particularly this case. If you look at the way hip hop is going, it's going right into the gutter. Like we went through people who actually had a message and said a message. Now it went to materialism. Then it went to dope boy culture. It didn't went to dance culture. Now it's just gone into ignorance culture of just saying anything you want and not necessarily being on beat when you say it. And I think if Jay-Z came out with an album right now, who would buy it? Like the kids aren't listening to a 60-year-old rap about yachts, being a billionaire, the woman that he has on his arm, jewelry. None of these kids are financially stable enough to even care about that type of music. They like the drill beat stuff. It's either make me dance, make me kill somebody, or make me shake my butt. That's it. And if Jay-Z just put out an album, I don't think anybody would buy it. I don't think anybody would pay attention to it. He's already on his way out. The only thing that's keeping him relevant is his woman and the fact that she's doing concerts. Like if right now, if Jay-Z booked the concert, who would show up? I mean, would he make money? I mean, we don't know. We're just speculating, but we could tell by the way music is going, it's already moving away from that generation.
So you think we could be at the end of hip hop as this major cultural influence?
I think so. You already seeing hip hop already infiltrating the country, the country genre. You've seen they're already about to turn country into pop, and next is coming after pop is rap. So you're gonna get more country rap stars than you get hip hop stars. And this is this is no surprise. I mean, look what they did with the civil rights movement when they infiltrated the Dixiecrats. The people that really hated us and lynched us and hung us, we tried to infiltrate into that just to eat stale food from Woolworths. But this is what they do. They move us from one genre to the next for money, for prestige, and more control over the masses. That's pretty much it. But to go back to your question about comparing him to Russell, I would think they will almost be similarly the same. I mean, Russell likes young women. When Jay was going after B was a very young woman. Now, I did a Rockaware photo shoot in Colorado, and I think it was during the wintertime of 06 or 07. And Naomi Campbell was there, actress Jamie King was there, Jay was there, B was there, and he rented this house, and we were supposed to do this rap party for this photo shoot. We rented this house, and we were watching LeBron play, and after the game, it had to be like 10 or 11 o'clock. So we getting ready to party. Mind you, it's all adults. There was a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old teenage Latin girl that was there, and I think she had to leave because she had school and she had to do homework, but she brought her mother with her. So it was no funny business going on, which I could respect that. So when 11 o'clock hit, we turned on the music, we started drinking, and then out of nowhere came these young children. I don't know where they came from. For a rap party at 11 o'clock at night, drinking, loud music, and us dancing wild, like, I don't know where these kids came from. And then I happened to sit down because I was dancing with one of the assistants. And I sat next to this child, and the child sat next to Beyoncé. So I hear B say something about, doesn't this look sexy, or isn't this sexy? And in my mind, and mind you, I'm not awakened as I'm awakened now. So in my mind, I'm like, what did she just say? And then I didn't pay no attention to it. And then, obviously the liquor took hold of me and I had to leave. So I said bye to everybody and left. But those kids remained. I don't know if those kids were from the photo shoot themselves, but the fact that these kids came around adults during drinking hours or partying hours was already alarming to me. So when I hear something like this happens, I can't really discount it and say, oh, he could never do this, because I'm hearing stories, I'm seeing it with my own eyes, and I've been in situations where something don't sound or look right, and it's usually involving children.
Larry, you've just blown my mind, and so I'm gonna have to ask you to. I just want to be clear on what I just heard. In 2006 or 7,
yeah,
you're in Colorado at a winter party with Jay-Z and the people with Rock Nation. And
it was the people who helped out with the photo shoot. It was a winter campaign that we shot. Mm-hmm.
and it's at some very nice mansion somewhere in Colorado.
Yeah, up in the mountains somewhere.
And Beyonce is sitting relatively close to you, and there's a child there.
Yeah.
And this is after 11 o'clock at night. And she says, "Doesn't this look sexy?"
Mm-hmm.
Beyonce, the singer.
I ain't gonna lie to you. Yes. Yes.
And the reason why I believe you, I'm not gonna put a name to this. The reason why I believe you is like they get you out there and they float little test bubbles out there to see if you bite.
Mm-hmm.
It's like going fishing. Does the bob? Did I get a nibble? Did the bobber go down? Because I've been in that situation. I'm not gonna name names, but it was a prominent sports media figure that I had a social gathering at my apartment in downtown LA, Apex building, probably 20 people inside my apartment. And someone tried to engage me in a conversation about, can't you understand why older men find 14 and 15-year-old women attractive? And I was like, no, I really can't. And then they followed back up, and I was like, and then I just walked away, and I made a mental note like, hey, this person is on some different shit, quite frankly. And I was like, and I kept, and it shocked me because I wasn't expecting this from this person, and it's always stuck with me. And you know, I would elaborate and give a few more details, but it would potentially give away the person if I gave any more details. But it was just like a test, and I can remember like, yeah, I just failed that test. And so whatever they got going on out here in LA, and they trying to figure out if they can get me in some kind of conversation about whether I was attracted to 14 and 15-year-old women, I just failed that test. So I don't think you're lying or exaggerating. I think that is real out there in Hollywood. It's part of the reason why I left Los Angeles. And Larry, to me, it's like you've watched the Godfather 2 movies, the mafia movies. And what the music industry in Hollywood is much like the mafia, like the Sopranos, in terms of you can't become a made man until you've killed somebody in the mafia. You gotta make your bones. You gotta, and it sounds to me in Hollywood and in the music industry, if you want to make it to the top, you must be involved in some sort of sexual deviancy before and they must know about it before they fully trust you. Do you agree with that?
I absolutely agree, because we all know how shameful it is to be messing around with a child, no matter what the age. And they know that the majority of the people in this country or in this world do not sit by and will not let anybody abuse children. So that's more of a shame thing they can control you with. Now, sacrificing somebody, that's personal. You know, not many people can add those or connect those dots of who did what and who did this, but it happens. But when it comes to sexual deviancy, as you said, it's more of we don't want the whole world to know what you've really been up to, so you have to do what we say do. And I think that's how they move. And like you said, I think it's like putting a worm on a hook. They see who bite. They're not gonna come up to you and say, hey, you like 5-year-olds? They're not gonna do that because you look at them weird, or you might just punch them in the mouth. But they'll put you in situations where if young children are around, they'll move you into it. It may not be a 5-year-old, but it'll start at a 19-year-old at a party. It'll go from a 15-year-old at a party. Then you show up at somebody's private home and residence, and it's like a 9-year-old. And then they keep going to see how far you can go. And I don't want to imagine it, but I know they're going as far as they can go until they get into animals. And I know when it comes to sexual deviancy and it comes to lust, there is no backstop to that until you reach an animal. And that's where, if we talk about the days of Noah, that's exactly where sexual deviancy ends up. It ends up with animals.
The other element, and this is because I used to drink, and I used to smoke a little weed, but at some point I came into an awareness like, oh man, if you go look at most of the mistakes I've made in my life, alcohol was involved, and it's like they get you, and this thing about LA, they get you at these parties, get some liquor in you, get some weed that may be laced with something, maybe they spike your drink, and then it's like when Beyonce says, "Doesn't that look sexy?" Well, your inhibitions are down, your self control is down because they got the liquor, the drugs in you, and the next thing you know, you're doing things you wouldn't do sober, and they just happen to have a camera on it and pictures of it, and then they have you for the rest of your life.
Right.
And that's what I see. I mean, I just, not to go to, but it's just like I look at the dude, what Baby from Cash Money. I'm like, he's kissing all these dudes in the mouth, and he got this prison mentality. I was just like, all these guys, they're not in control. They accept the money, and then they promote the wickedness. It's very, once your scales come off your eyes, it's so easy to see. And I'm glad you connected it to the Bible, because that would be the last thing I would want to bring up. It's like, if you look at the story of Moloch and just how child sacrifice, Leviticus, just go to Leviticus, child sacrifice, it's always been a part of the devil's plan. And again, that's why the Bible will tell you there's nothing new. We keep thinking all this stuff is brand new. No, man, they've had different forms of this since the beginning of time, and we just can't see it. Larry, I'm gonna give you the final thought. I appreciate you making the time. If there's something I haven't asked you or a comment you want to get in, do it now.
No, we touched on a lot, and I'm thankful for you bringing it on to the show, and hopefully your listeners would really take this world serious. There's another world that we don't see, but they tell us what they want us to know. But if you do your due diligence, if you really do your searching, search through these people and see who they have been taking oaths to. What doctrines do they follow? And then you can add it up. So it's really no speculating, and there's really no, oh, it's alleged. When you can tie the connection and you could tie the dots together, it's all held together under one doctrine. If you look what that doctrine is and you look what it propagates, it's very easy to say that this person is full of crap, that person is full of crap, because I know who they obey. And they do it through their symbolism. They do it right in front of you. They do it with their hands. They do it with their mouths. It's right in front of you. All you have to do is have the willingness to look and search for it, and it'll keep you, really, it'll keep you sane, and you'll start laughing at these things. Mind you, a 13-year-old getting raped is not a laughable matter, but when you look at what they do to keep this all from you and to keep you blinded by putting it in plain sight, you'll be able to walk away from a lot of these strongholds that are wreaking havoc on your mind and your spirit and your soul and keeping you away from the Creator who created you to see the light instead of the darkness.
Larry, thank you so much. Appreciate the time. I want to get you out here to Nashville and at my home studio so we can have a longer conversation. You're on a fascinating journey. It's why I know God is real, because I knew you back when we were butting heads and you had a whole different mindset, and I did too. I lived at a strip club back then. But to see you go through this journey and process is that's why I know God is real. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you so much.
Okay, let's go to the other. Okay, this is a second interview, the number one darkest ritual the global satanic cult performs. Ian Carroll, it's the Danny Jones clips, and this goes to the next video that we're gonna see with Anneke.
There is a global satanic religion that does operate aspects of cults around the world. Whether you think that like Hillary Clinton is literally in it or not is a whole different like level of conspiracy. But like
a global satanic religion?
Oh yeah, dude. Have you gone down the satanic ritual abuse rabbit hole? It is so dark. So what I'm referring to specifically are survivors giving survivor testimony on video, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. Like not like one guy came forward and said this, like there are whole support networks for these people. Like there are psychologists that specialize in SRA victims, satanic ritual abuse. And because you have to like treat them in a whole different way than a regular abuse victim, because the level of depravity and disgusting, like literal torture of children, like literal, so, your episode is so screwed now, but there's one in particular that this guy was on the Alandra Markman podcast, and I wish I could remember his name, and we don't even want to pull it up because it's so dark. And everyone should, you know, watch it for themselves and judge it for themselves in terms of whether you think he's telling the truth or not. But personally, it's like you can look into his life, and this guy, like his whole life is based around him recovering from this essentially story of his childhood and abuse, and it looks pretty looks far more likely that he's telling mostly the truth than entirely lies to me. And what he alleges in this interview that aired like a year ago or so, a little less, on Alandra Markman's podcast, is that he was born into a satanic family, of which there are many around the world, and that he was groomed from an early age to essentially be a Jeffrey Epstein type of character in a global satanic cult that is not all satanic, but the Satanists are a part of this sort of bigger network of crime and everything. And he alleges that he was...
How do they? I'm curious how they define themselves. Satanists. Like, what is the definition of a Satanist to them?
My understanding is that some of them, based on what he said, is that some of them are literally worshiping Satan, and some of them are practicing these things in this cult format and structure. And when I tell you what he's alleging, you'll realize that are so like in the same way that like some Jews are really practicing Jewish people, and some Jewish people are. And I don't mean to say, I'm not trying to make that connection. I'm just saying that we were just talking about Jews. Some people are more practicing of a religion than others, but you might still go to church, and you might still, you might identify as Christian, but you're not as Christian as the next guy. But he alleges that he was groomed from an early age, tortured every day as a child, like abused every day as a child, to be groomed to have multiple personalities. And then by the time he was like a preteen, he was engaging in child death matches where he would be put in a cage and he would fight to the death with another child in like downtown New York in underground like parties that rich people and businessmen would attend. And then that and it sounds so insane, but when you watch it, it's like hard. And it's not like he's the only one that has claimed this. He's just one that put it all in a particularly, like, lots of people have lots of claims about this kind of shit. And he also claims that then after that, he was being groomed to be an actor, and he froze up in his acting interview. And so he got shifted from the acting pathway, because these guys, like, there's a fuckload of money in this community, allegedly, as in, it's tied into all of the global sex trafficking networks. Because how do you think that global trafficking sort of gets all the handlers and gets all of the sort of like operatives that run it? Is you need people that were abused in order to run these things, because you need to be that kind of broken, like you need to be groomed to be able to run this without breaking it.
Yeah, is this all like tied into like the Franklin scandal?
Similar, yeah. So he claims he met Jeffrey Epstein on 2 occasions. He claims that he was being groomed to essentially be a handler similar to Jeffrey Epstein. And he had a really lucid description that Jeffrey Epstein was an insanely good code switcher, is what made Jeffrey unique, that he could be completely normal businessman, like banker guy right now, and then like literally turn the other way and be an absolute depraved, abusive monster, and then like right back on like the drop of a pin. And that's what made him so unique in this guy's perspective. And he kind of like had his programming, his like trauma did not work correctly. And so rather than going that route, he became a breeder. And he alleges that he was sent to a compound in Mexico where he would breed with trafficked girls all day, every single day, for like 2 or 3 years. And they would just breed and breed and breed and breed. And he alleges that that is because they were particularly interested in him because of his bloodline and his heritage as some sort of direct descendant of King Solomon, is what he says. And it's like,
who's this dude? What's this dude's name again?
I don't remember his name. I remember that he was on the Alandra Markman podcast, and she is a survivor of satanic ritual abuse as well.
Is she Anneke Lucas?
Yes, Anneke Lucas.
Anneke Lucas.
Okay, so
this is what.
Okay, so Alandra Markman is his name, and Anneke Lucas is her name.
Oh,
She's the one hosting the podcast, and
so
that's
he's the guy.
podcast.
He's the descendant of who?
So what he says in there is that they were interested in him because he has something like 97% Ashkenazi Jewish heritage or something like that, and is allegedly a direct descendant of King Solomon's bloodline. He doesn't say whether he knows that's true or not or anything. He just says that he was made he was under the impression that that was why he got selected for the breeding program specifically. And
Does he have any proof of this?
not really, no. And so that's why I say like you should, and first, you should not watch it if you are at all sensitive in any way. And you should only watch it when you are of like a sound heart and ready to like hear some of the most dark and fucked up things you've ever heard in your life. But
I can't believe it's not like fully fucking shadow banned.
I mean, it kind of is, but not really. Yeah,
This one just came out 3 days ago.
I think that the reason it's not is because it's so unbelievable. And he's not the only one. There's so many people that have made claims like this.
It's not even, go back,
Yeah.
hover your mouse over it, see it plays the preview when you hover your mouse over it. That means it's not even demonetized. That's insane.
Is it possible that it's not monetized in the first place, that she doesn't even monetize her channel?
Well, it still
That's
wouldn't
possible,
show
sure.
it if you searched, right?
But when you demonetize stuff, when
I don't really know how it works.
So when
That one's
YouTube
not showing.
demonetizes a video and you hover over the thumbnail, it'll just show a play button.
Oh,
It
interesting.
won't show you a preview.
Good to know. So I did a little bit of digging into it
That
because
was
I had
demonetized.
the same take on it as this is so unbelievable. I got to
Yeah.
look into this guy. And what I found is that he would have to be like an entirely fake person who is actively, his life is dedicated to pushing this narrative. Because in the sense that he has history going back to therapy, he's known her personally, like she's putting her whole like life on the line for having known him. He's been on lots of interviews and podcasts. He's like his whole sort of background, like there is lots of records of who he is and the fact that he has been talking about this his entire life since exiting the cult, so to speak. And I think that everyone should make their own judgment of whether he's honest or not and what's going on. And my perspective is not that I know he is for sure telling the truth. My perspective is just that he is a data point among many that all point towards this is at least a factor in our world.
Go back. This is Alandra. Go to that page you were just on.
Maybe it says the same page.
Oh.
There you go.
That's him. That's like his current life. That's what he does
Chaos. Ah, friend, I've been expecting you. Sweet disorder. To my order, it's hellish, being a complex life form, hellish and sweet. Come lust become.
now. Some lust
becomes love. Other lust returns to the earth. Swear to me that you'll complicate my life, and I'll reason with elegant simplicity that I can handle it.
I think it's a poem. He's got
So
poetry
yeah, you've got to
here.
realize that this, if he's telling the truth, this is one of the most broken and then rebuilt human beings you have ever encountered in your life.
Mhm.
He alleges that he murdered countless children as a child.
He says this?
Yeah, because he was child death cage matches, like where rich people would pay to come into these underground fight matches in New York City, in the underground, in secret locations, and pay to watch children fight to the death.
Who the fuck would want to pay to watch that?
Well, think about Jeffrey Epstein's clientele, right? We know that that's real.
You think
right?
Bill Clinton wanted to pay to watch it?
No. I'm just saying, like, think this through as a thought experiment.
Okay.
If you have everything in the world and like lust and power, like addictions, anyone who's ever experienced any form of addiction, whether it's like to alcohol or to Adderall or to like porn or heroin, all those addictions kind of play on this sort of like this feeling, this like desire of like, oh, I just felt so good. And like whatever else is wrong in the world, like that's not wrong. And that's good. That's, and they all kind of play on these same things. And powerful people, power, money, that lust for power, when turned towards the lusting and the greed, the darker side of power and money is inevitably an addiction as well in a lot of ways. And not everyone who's powerful and rich goes down that road, but clearly like the Epstein clients do, like clearly they want children, like they want to do, and there are snuff films, like people pay on the internet right now to watch murder, like to watch these kinds of things, because there's inherently a devil in everyone. I think the way I see it is that there's an angel and a devil in all of us, and you can feed the good wolf or the bad wolf, and some people get addicted to feeding the bad wolf. And a lot of times in a capitalist society that incentivizes greed and lust, like it incentivizes a lot of our worst behaviors, that means that a lot of the worst people will rise to the top of that system. And when you have people that are, I mean, you know, if you have 1,000 people that rise to the top of the capitalistic system in a room, one of them is probably going to be fucking evil, right? At least one. And you only need one billionaire or millionaire to be super evil, that suddenly there's a market for some really evil shit, right? right? Because they have all the money in the world and they'll pay for it, right? What is the point of having all that money if you're not going to pay for whatever you desire? And so in a world this big, with this many rich people, with this much corruption, with this much evil in it, with people like Jeffrey Epstein in it, I think, yeah, there's totally a bunch of fucking people that will pay for some horrible shit.
Yeah.
Including the president of the United States, Bill Clinton.
Right.
And I'm not saying he necessarily went and watched child cage matches, but Alandra Markman alleges that he was a fighter in child death cage matches. And he directly alleges that he saw more, I forget his exact words, but it was like, I saw world leaders from other countries that you might not recognize, but they're definitely like he alleges that he saw some very powerful people at those events.
Does he name any of them?
No, he talks it through actually in a way that kind of actually to me added credibility in the sense of like, he's like, I'm not going to say those names because I think they're still alive, they're still out there. But he names a few people that he's like, I'm pretty sure that guy's dead, and that guy's like, I'm not really worried about that name because it's a pseudonym I know, and like it's not gonna. But he doesn't really. He's thoughtful about if his story was true. He's presenting it in a way that would kind of be like. That's the problem. Is like it's kind of unprovable because he's not gonna be like this is the guy's name and he lives at that address and that's where it was because like then he's clearly gonna die if he's telling the truth. Yeah. But also if he's not telling the truth, then it's like
it's a crazy fucking conspiracy.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are just really fucking full of shit. And unless you have some sort of evidence or some sort of corroboration to your story, I mean, a lot of people felt like that with the Epstein thing when it first happened, and then everything started coming out, and then nobody denies that unless you're like got your head buried in sand.
That's
but
where
when it comes to a guy like this, it's just like,
well, everyone should draw their own. Yeah, everyone should draw their own conclusions. But I'm starting to come to the point where we've been lied to about so much, and every single time it's like. That could never be true. And it used to be like, oh, the CIA would never influence journalists. And oh boy, how far we have come from Operation Mockingbird. And it used to be like offensive that the CIA would ever influence the free press. And now it's like, bro, we have fucking like a child sexual blackmail ring targeting the president of the United States and succeeding. So that's where I start to lean towards, if I'm not sure, my bias is to lean towards the little guy that is telling on government and telling on corruption is more likely than not telling the truth. And that's not to say I believe him 100%. It's just to say that on balance, I'm more likely to believe the regular person who's putting their life out there just being like, the CIA wronged me, this government is doing this thing. And it's not always true by any means. But I tend to sort of lean towards like, I would rather believe that person and look for more evidence and kind of like, and this is one where there's just so many versions of that story out there.
Like from my experience, I get like a dozen of those guys emailing me every week.
I do too, actually. Yeah, I do too. And I would argue you don't get guys like that. It's hard to say. I mean, you should watch it at some point when you got the time for it. Because his body language, obviously you can't tell for sure from it. But that's where I start to like look at the Finders cult, look at the Nexium cult, look at Jeffrey Epstein, look at
the Nexium thing's fucking
crazy, dude. Who's the the guy that ran Virgin Mobile or whatever it was, Virgin Galactic? No, Richard Branson. There's a lot of darker people than just Jeffrey Epstein that have been caught. Am I confusing Branson with the other guy? Who was the billionaire that owned all the islands that was on camera talking about how he like wanted to breed with the black women because they had such good genetics?
I don't know.
Oh man, I forget. I think that's who it was.
You think that would? I mean, Richard Branson. I mean, he owned Virgin. He owns Virgin Airlines, Virgin Mobile.
I could be confusing him though with one of the other old white-haired tech billionaires. But there's just like
sounds on par though.
Yeah, there's a lot of just. There's starting to be more and more and more overwhelming evidence that Satanism. I mean, hey, let's rewind. Anton LaVey, do you know who that is?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So, like, we know that Satanism is a religion. Like, we know that it does exist.
It's a ridiculous religion. Yeah. It's not based on anything. It's not based on anything. It's like, it's been fabricated.
I would argue you're probably correct in some ways, but also it's
at the end of the day, it's fucking religious. Like, you're fucking, like, that's not the that's not what it means. Like, that's not what Satan really was, according to Christians, or according
Yeah.
to Catholics, or according to any ancient texts.
Yeah. In the same way that, like, these days, a lot of religious institutions are actually just people kind of perverting concepts and using
Yeah.
them to manipulate people to do things.
Right.
I would argue that is textbook what Homeboy is alleging in that interview is like, and it's the same thing with like any religious institution is like, yeah, there's like the belief, the word of God, the actual spiritual structure of a religion that I think is super valuable for humans to have. It's super valuable for us to have. But then there's the side of like, okay, now let's institutionalize it and control it and like give it back to you in this new way.
Okay, let's stop share. And okay, let's just play a little bit of this interview, and then I'll analyze it later. I will do another. But let's just watch the beginning of this. A couple minutes.
Hello and welcome to this podcast episode of the Anneke Lucas podcast. So it's been a while since I've been able to do a live interview, and I'm so happy that we're here in New York. I'm speaking to someone I've known for almost 10 years, actually, that we know each other from survivor groups, and he is in New York just for a few days, so it was just very lucky. Everything just fell into place that we were able to set this up and do this. So very excited about our interview. As you know, I pay out of pocket for these podcasts. I really appreciate your support. I've had some amazing support from you. Thank you so much. Just want to really acknowledge you for the funds that are coming in. And of course, as you know, every little bit helps. So if you want to make a small donation just to support the content, I very, very much appreciate it. So my guest today is Alandra Markman, and he's a survivor like myself, or maybe a little bit differently. So welcome, Alandra.
Thanks, Anneke.
It's good to see you again.
You too.
Yeah, so we were really hanging out, maybe like you said it was 2015, 2016 when we were spending more time together.
Mm-hmm.
So very happy to see you again. I'm glad we got reconnected.
Me too.
And, you know, we know each other as survivors of SRA, and I guess maybe we can start with having you tell us a little bit, an overview of, well, your life and SRA experiences.
Sure.
Thanks.
I was born into a Satanic family, so this was on both sides of the family, going back quite a few generations, as far as I'm aware. Probably going back many generations, but it gets difficult to know. In her front life, sometimes with other survivors, I'll say front life and back life. So the front life is kind of your public life that everybody sees, and your back life is what most people don't see and where a lot of the abuse happens. So in front life, my mother was a sex worker. Yeah, by choice. I mean, supposedly. And also an activist on behalf of mental patients. And those were kind of the two big things. In back life, she was a slave to some other members of her family and also non-family members who were part of the cult networks. So very complex. And my father, in front life, was one of her clients. And they never had any formal relationship. But it's since come to my understanding that he was also from a bloodline that the cult network was interested in. And so their pairing was arranged behind the scenes.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know I've also observed that the people that when they took an interest in me, they first had to know about my blood, which I didn't know anything about. And I don't even know what they did and how they measured it, and I know that you even have a very unusual blood type. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, AB negative, which certain aspects of the network take a very deep interest in, unfortunately for me. Yeah.
So did you grow up with just your mother, or?
In Front Life, yes, it was primarily me and my mother, and that's essentially what I was coached to say. You know, I live in a single parent home with my mother. In reality, I was surrounded by people all the time, other handlers in the cult network and different types of sex workers, and I was made to be a sex worker or sex trafficked. So there were a lot of different kinds of adults around, and
So
some of them.
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, and some of them had family roles with me, or they would play the roles of certain family figures.
Oh, I see. But you were trafficked right from when you were very young?
Yes, I was.
I'm sorry.
Thanks.
So that was your first role, because your mother even, publicly was a sex worker, and then you immediately got sex trafficked.
Yes.
And so in the network setting, in the back, say, backstage, these are SRA families, so it's the sex trafficking. Was there other stuff happening already at a very young age as well?
Yeah, a wide variety of torture and abuse was happening. I suppose I can just get right into it since we're here for this purpose. Yeah, I witnessed not just sex trafficking, but a lot of different types of violence and torture. Yeah, some of it lethal to the participants, murders. So that was also happening.
And you were there, and did you feel that you were not going to get killed, or was there sometimes that you might have gotten killed? Did you feel that because of maybe your blood or whatever reason, or because your mother was in it, or did you feel that there was a purpose there for you?
Yeah, several questions in there. Well, there's a complex relationship between hypnotic suggestions and programming to commit suicide and the practical need of the cult to keep people alive, to use them. So there's this push-pull that a lot of us, especially when we're born into it, I mean, we experience this from birth, where we're being told to kill ourselves and to live at all costs at the same time. And that's part of the cognitive dissonance and the psychic torture aspect of it, just a glimpse.
Yeah, like in your day life, in your front life, did you even know?
I was in and out of knowledge. Of course, you can't forget things like this, not really. They can fade from awareness, and that's usually what people call repressed memory. I mean, but of course my body would be in horrible pain, and I was aware that I was missing time, so I couldn't not be aware of it, but I stayed as unaware as possible because there was very severe torture. If I showed that I remembered an experience, there was usually very severe torture. So I learned to hide. If I did have a memory of something, I learned to hide it. And then over time, I learned to lie to myself and, kind of actually repress some of the memories more deeply.
So you're talking as a child, if you remembered something and somebody found out, then you would be tortured to make sure that you would forget again, or that you would never even start talking about it?
Yeah. And I mean, so maybe I should pause, back up a little bit. I was being fragmented into different personalities from the time I was born. From the time I was an infant, I mean, even before the formation of any coherent personality, my experience and my sense of self was being fragmented into lots of different alters. One thing that would happen if I started telling, about a certain torture experience or a certain, sexual experience that I had had, that aspect of me that was telling would be shamed and punished and banished, and made into a separate altar that I wasn't supposed to access. So I have many dozens of altars, some of them quite well thought out, and with a lot of thought put into them, and some of them just sort of stopgap experiences, like, oh, that was just a shut up altar, and it's like, it's a named individual within me, but its entire purpose is just to stop some certain story from coming out.
And so just to ground your beginning of your life, you were in Long Island, basically.
Yeah. Most of what I'm describing is taking place in the Lower East Side of Manhattan.
Oh.
Yeah.
Is that where you lived?
Yeah.
Okay. So you lived on the Lower East Side, and I'm sorry, when was this happening? When were you born?
Well, my birth certificate may be a little bit off. I'm still learning a lot about my background. I have other family and siblings who were not supposed to exist, that I was never allowed to be conscious of. So I'm still piecing things together. But my birth certificate says I was born in '86. So I guess I'm 37 or so.
Okay, so very young.
Yeah. And everything I'm describing was already happening, I mean, from birth up until like around 4 years old was when these kind of dissociative systems were pretty solidified. So this is very, very early. Like most of this is pre-conscious.
So your Lower East Side and the people around you, some of them are presenting as family members, even if maybe they're not, but they're basically, you're surrounded by handlers.
Yeah.
While your mother is continuing to be a sex worker.
Yeah.
And you're her only child?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not actually her only child, but...
But you're the only one that lived in that place with her?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm assuming that because she was single also, that you were there's just a lot of people around you all the time that were not.
This is true, yeah.
Good people too?
Not so much. When I was a little bit older, my mother had a boyfriend who was not in the cult. So he was a very positive person for me, and he actually later adopted me as an adult. And so that's part of the reason I'm sane today. I did have a few healthy people around, healthy adults, teachers at school, people outside the family, and that one boyfriend, but he wasn't allowed to see her for very long because the handlers didn't like me having a positive role model. So he was cut off from me for most of my childhood.
Sorry to hear that.
Thanks.
Yeah, so it's these people that are your handlers, were there any that you were particularly close to? I mean, I was very close to some, so.
Yeah, I had very deep bonds with several of them. One whose name was Patrick was like an uncle figure to me. Yeah, we were very, very closely bonded. I think, through all the torture and shame and confusion, I think there was also some real emotional bonding there, positive emotional bonding. So yeah, I have a lot of mixed feelings. But he would be introduced as my uncle sometimes, like if we were out in public, and I was alone with him. That's how he would be described.
But you know for sure he was a handler because he was also abusing you and
Yeah.
and he was also training you.
Yeah. Yeah, I was being trained for a wide variety of things. Most obviously to accept sexual violence, to perpetrate sexual violence, to accept and to perpetrate physical violence. I was being trained as a killer. I was being trained also as a breeder for the cult. So I was supposed to create many children, and I did create many children after I passed through puberty later on.
So this is now you're talking, yeah, after you passed through puberty, so this is in your teens now.
Yeah,
as a breeder.
I'm jumping ahead a bit, but I'm just saying I was basically being trained for constant sexual activity from the moment I was born, like absolutely constant. And that was normalized as much as possible in my household.
Oh, with your mother as a sex worker, it's kind of normalized already, yeah?
Yeah.
But she also had a nonprofit.
Yeah, she did. She also did a lot of really good work, actually, as a civil rights activist on behalf of people with mental disabilities, especially people who had been brain damaged by psychiatric practices like electroshock therapy.
How interesting.
Yeah. So that's, well, I don't want to just let it flow, see what happens. Yeah, the cult network uses electricity, electric torture, electroshock quite pervasively.
Yeah.
So that was the case for my mother, it was the case for me.
And me.
Sorry to hear that. But then also in Front Life, she went through medically prescribed, like mainstream psychiatric electroconvulsive therapy, which is a whole different thing, similar and related. I mean, part of the idea with that was that it would discredit her.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of stigma associated with mental health treatment.
Of course, yeah.
So, in spite of the fact that her issues came from her circumstances, you know, she was kind of isolated and made to feel crazy and went through quite a few mental health treatment experiences, mainstream ones. Some of those were before I was born. So I don't, I wasn't there for some of them, but she went through many electroconvulsive therapy treatments at psychiatric hospitals, in addition to what was happening at home and in the background.
Well, I've worked with several people. You know, I was never in a psychiatric institution. I was never diagnosed even. Yeah, I was just in therapy. But I work with several people who were survivors that have spent a lot of time in psychiatry and have a lot of, and had handlers right there on the unit, making sure basically that they're not remembering. It seems to be always the same story.
Yeah, that was definitely the case.
So your mother was really, in a large sense, she was very much a victim. She was very much on the victim side of the network, except that she also abused you?
She did,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, we had an incestuous relationship from birth also.
Yeah. That must be so complex.
I'm glad it's over.
Yeah, my mother also was very much like a victim, always very sexualized, and she also abused me, you know, but she presented very much as a victim on the outside. And of course she was, at some point, she was not so much in her adult life when she was my mother. She wasn't really being victimized, but she put herself in these situations all the time where, at the very least, she got very humiliated.
Yeah, it was made clear to me from the age that I could even hold the thought that my mother was a token and a pawn. And I mean, she would be raped in front of me and beaten in front of me. And, you know, it was, yeah, I mean, they wanted me to know that she, you know, was at the beck and call of others. Yeah.
then you're getting the message that you don't have a mother.
Also,
So, were some of the handlers perhaps better parental figures, or?
I guess in some senses, yeah, some of them were more coherent. And so I was able to bond with them more consistently. That's true. Yeah.
But the rape was coming from everywhere.
Yeah.
They were all guilty of that.
Mm-hmm.
The normalization of that sexuality with children, in my public role, I was even supposed to promote that, promote the sexualization. But you were supposed to be doing that very much behind the scenes, being an object as well as a perpetrator, and do you think that you were being groomed to stay in the network?
Definitely, yeah. I was supposed to be a breeder for the whole rest of my life after puberty, and I was supposed to, in the cult network way of looking at things, I was supposed to be programming others to have similar experiences, to be breeders themselves. It was perceived in me that I would make a very good handler myself, that I would make a very good programmer. And so a lot of my training was in that direction as well.
Right. Well, actually, I know you to be a very creative, artistic person. Interesting. I mean, not that you don't have many talents, but mostly I know that you have poetry workshops and poetry classes, and you write poetry yourself, and you're also a great musician. I've actually experienced that. And not just one instrument too, many instruments, and really beautiful music that you make.
That also runs in my family. My mother was a piano player as well.
Oh.
And when she was growing up, she actually was in piano competitions and things, and thought she might make a career out of it. I think that may be what she was being groomed for early in her life. Yeah.
I mean, what a turn, though, if she was being groomed to be a pianist and then ends up as a sex worker.
Yeah, quite a turn. I mean, she was heartbroken, naturally. I mean, heartbreak is part and parcel of all these experiences. But yeah, I think she really hoped to be a major classical concert pianist. And that was a dream that she dearly cherished.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Well, you are the creative person.
Yeah, that's also on both sides of my family. My biological father also plays a lot of instruments and sings and paints and writes and stuff like that. So,
oh, really?
yeah.
So, yes, we talked about that somewhat, but so do you have a sense of what you were supposed to be on the outside, like your front?
Well, a few things were. It seemed like it was constantly changing, but I guess what my handlers and my mother had sort of settled on by the time I was becoming a teenager was that I might be an actor. I might be. There was talk about going into some sort of comedy thing, being on Saturday Night Live, and that was appealing to me, and thought about it a little bit, and so that may have been a public role that I was being groomed for a little bit.
How interesting. I mean, it's sort of like within the network, these possibilities are all real.
Yeah.
So, do you remember getting trained? Because I do, for singing and everything.
Well, I guess I should. Yeah, I was. I worked as a model as a child and an actor. I was supposed to be working as an actor from a young age, from childhood. I did actually work as a model. I was in a lot of advertisements and magazines and things.
As a child.
As a child, yeah. Supposedly I was, I was just noticed at random in a Starbucks in downtown Manhattan, like, oh, you have a very photogenic child, like, maybe you want to have them be a model. I mean, now I know this is sort of prearranged.
Right. That's the story.
Yeah.
That's the
but
story.
That's the story that I was supposed to tell. Like, oh, we met this nice man in the Starbucks, and it sounds very normal.
And next thing, wow, you're all over.
Yeah.
Advertising everywhere.
Yeah. So I did a lot of magazine advertisements. I did a little bit of TV. Of course, I never saw any of the money from this. It was like totally laundered away, which is infuriating.
And your mother didn't see it either.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Okay, so that is Anneke Lucas with Alandra Markman. So check out that whole interview. We just watched the first like 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so. So check that out, and we'll see you next time.